Hello there, Tom Rapp in Melbourne, Florida. Thanks for taking time to talk with us, Tom.
Yes, right.
You're from Bottineau, North Dakota, which you told me is just close to the Canadian border.
Right.
You were given a guitar at the age of 6. So who gave you that guitar? And you were telling me it was made out of...
Inferior grade plywood, I think. There was, living next to us was a guy who locally did country and western music. And when I got the guitar from my grandparents, he showed me chords and things. And I started playing like Marty Robbins songs and Everly Brothers and Elvis Presley's Hound Dog, things like that. So, which was nice. It was a nice thing to be able to do.
Even though it was made out of inferior wood, how did it sound?
Well, to my untrained ear, it sounded perfectly fine.
Okay.
I didn't realize until later when I got my Martin D18S that they were actually capable of producing music.
And could you tune the guitar?
You could. Yeah, no, I mean, it didn't seem to ever go out of tune, but maybe I didn't notice. I was 6.
Were you keen to play guitar every day and play with your next door neighbour? And I mean...
Yeah, I played the guitar a lot. I got the calluses on my finger that you need to have. Before you get the calluses, your fingers are usually bleeding all over the neck. It's good to get the calluses.
That's a real, true guitarist, isn't it?
That's right.
And so you're playing the guitar, and did you have an ambition to be a professional musician? Because I know both your parents were teachers, so was there any sort of guidance into music or anything like that?
Actually, my mother, when she was a kid, did singing commercials on the radio in Corey, Pennsylvania. So I think she was bitten by the bug more than I was or my sister. But she wanted us to be in talent shows and sing songs, and we did that together with harmony, and then my sister didn't really care for it all that much. So I would be in these talent shows, which they have a lot in Minnesota. Little towns all over have Northfield has Jesse James days because he robbed the bank there. So I was in those, and that's when I went on to a show in Rochester. Bob Dylan was also playing it. This is like 55 or something like that. I'm told from people I know who work with Dylan that they asked him about did he do those talent shows, and he said yes, he did. So my parents had a scrapbook that they kept, and it had the list of who was playing there. It was me and the other people, and this Bobby Zimmerman was also playing. Now, I wish I could remember that. I don't remember him playing or who he was or anything, but we were both beaten by a little girl in a red sequin costume who twirled batons.
Well, there you go. So would you know if little Bobby Zimmerman remembered you in turn?
I don't think he did. I can tell you my Dylan story.
Yes, you're welcome.
When I was playing, I already made several records, and I was playing with Ramblin' Jack Elliott at the Bottom Line in New York City. It was 75 or 6 before the Rolling Thunder tour. So Dylan's great friends with Ramblin' Jack Elliott. So he was just hanging out at the Bottom Line like every day, all week. And the owners, and he'd be backstage and talking with his people. The people who ran the club said, "Now listen, don't talk to Dylan." So we didn't. But after the last show, I got off and I was going back to the dressing room, and there he was in the middle of the hallway, and he said, at the time it was just me and I had harmonica and so on, and he said, "I like that guitar harmonica sound," which I thought was kind of pretty funny.
As he based his career on a guitar and harmonica sound.
In the beginning, yeah. And in fact, then Dylan came up on stage when Jack Elliott asked him, "Hey Bob, come on up on stage." And the only guitar there that Dylan could play was mine, and I said, "Hey, please, help yourself." I strung my guitar differently than most people did at that time. So the G string, which is the third from the bottom as you're looking down, I replaced that with a very high E string, so it was still a G string, but it was an octave higher. And Dylan starts playing, and he immediately realizes what that is, and he starts riffing off the fact that other string is there like that. So which made me think, not that I did beforehand, but it made me think he was a genius musically, because he was just able to pick that complete strange thing up and use it to his advantage. So that was great.
Yeah, but Tom, you're a bigger genius because you finished 3rd and he finished 5th. Is that right?
That doesn't count.
Oh, it doesn't. Well, it counted to those judges.
Yes, I suppose so.
You should have mentioned it to him there, Tom.
Yeah.
I'm sure he would have loved it. Getting back to your career, so were there any dreams or ambitions of being a professional musician at that young age when you got that guitar?
I liked the fact that people would listen to me play and stuff, and when I was about 6, I wrote my first song, which was about a dying cowboy. which shows you how odd I was even then. But I really didn't have a plan to become a musician. And it was only later in the early 60s when I first heard Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and Peter, Paul and Mary and the whole folk thing that I really started wanting to play those kind of songs and began writing them and so on. We sent in a disc that we put together to ESP Disc, who I knew about because they recorded The Fugs with Ed Sanders and Thule Kupferberg. I put a letter like, you might like our stuff too. And they said, sure thing, come on up and record a record. And that was like May of 67, so that was cool.
So were you still in high school then?
No, I think we had both. There were 4 of us from the high school, and we had all graduated a year or 2 before that.
Was that Wayne, Lane, and Roger?
Yes, and Wayne lives in Melbourne, Florida as well, which is kind of funny, but he still plays banjo a little.
Do you know where Lane and Roger have gone on to?
Yeah, I haven't heard from them recently, but I know that right after being with us, Roger Trissinger joined a band called One, O-N-E. They recorded for Jefferson Airplane's record label, which is called Grunt. So I know he's on at least that record, and I think probably still in music, though I really haven't heard from him in a long time. Right. And Lane really was a professional musician. He played English horn with symphonies and stuff like that. And he joined the Navy band. He is now married and has 3 children.
Do you know where he is? Is he in Melbourne as well?
I don't believe he's in Melbourne as well, but someplace in Florida, I think.
That demo that you sent to ESP, what was it? Was it basically One Nation Underground, or was it different songs?
Yes, that demo was 2 or 3 of songs I had written, but I think that was all the songs I had written at that time. So we had folk songs from like the Newport Festival and stuff, and some songs from the Baez songbook and so on. It
was pretty easy to get the ESP signing on the dotted line. I read, though, that a bit tardy with royalties, or did you ever get what you were owed eventually?
No, well, ESP had a problem that it allowed people to do their own thing and record and stuff, but there was never any money that came to the musicians ever. So that was kind of a problem, There were times when my wife at that time, Elizabeth, we'd be together and we're eating like oatmeal and, without milk for like weeks at a time. So that wasn't so good.
No, in retrospect, this is a wonderful album, Tom, and it's even 46 years later, it's held in high esteem. I'll tell you how I found out about Pearls Before Swine. I don't know if you've heard of a woman called Lillian Roxon.
Yes, she did the Rock Encyclopedia.
Yeah, that's where I read about Pearls Before Swine, so I thought, look, I'll have to investigate further, and luckily I found a used copy, and this is an import because I don't think ESP had distribution in Australia.
I don't think so.
I've got the record here and it says printed in the USA. If I remember rightly, Lillian Roxon, who was Australian.
Oh.
Yeah, if you didn't know that. She was Australian. She was a New Yorker who sadly died very young. She died of an asthma attack. Yeah. And just a bit of trivia for you, Tom. Her niece is our Attorney General.
Ah.
Yeah, Nicola Roxon is our Attorney General. So,
okay.
Yes, they're high achievers, the Roxon family.
Very good, yes.
It must have been a bit of a buzz for you to have, even though you never got any money, must have been a bit of a buzz just to hold the record there, the artifact.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, and we hear it on the radio, something we pull over and stop, turn the song up, on the radio. And it was nice. And we picked that Bosch cover. Originally, it was just in black and white or sepia or something. Then they finally put it in color. So it made a really good-looking album and a mysterious album. And we figured that nobody wanted to see another album cover of 4 white guys, So Bosch's and Bruegel's and Bellini's and all of those other artists I thought would be more interesting than us.
Well, you filled the Pearls Before Swines with all the great old masters, didn't you?
Many of them, yes.
Maybe I'm a bit of a Philistine, but I'd never heard or seen Hieronymus Bosch before until I got the One Nation album, so...
Oh, yeah, wow. Yeah, it became very popular after that, not probably just because of us, but the album originally came with a fold-out panel from the Bosch painting, and I used to see it like on everybody's walls. He'd be playing and stuff. Steve Stills had one up on his wall. So I knew we were selling records because parts of it were up on the wall. Well, you know what? It was strange. I only found out like 40 years later, but the German filmmaker Fassbinder.
Yes, Rainer Werner Fassbinder, yeah.
In 1969, he made a movie called Rio das Mortes, The River of Death, and 2 songs from that album are on it, the soundtrack, and I did not hear about that until maybe 2 years ago.
He must have been a fan.
I guess so.
And he must have paid ESP.
Oh, God, I hope not. Yeah.
Who knows? But anyway, look, this is a wonderful debut, Tom. Uncle John is what a great anti-war song. And you guys really played well. I mean, I'm not a musician, but I know what I like. It's very consistent in mood, too. For a first record, it's a damn fine job.
Oh, thank you. We recorded it and mixed it so it was ready to go all in 4 days with no sleep, I think. So we went in, and at the end of 4 days, we had that record made.
Next came Balaklava. So did ESP say, guys, the record's done well, can you give us another one real quick? Or
Yeah, pretty much. We had that anti-war theme, put that all together, and we got to pick the cover and the back cover, which has drawings by Jean Cocteau when he was rehabbing out of morphine addiction. The good thing about ESP was they let you do what you wanted to do, but the money never showed up.
There's always a good side and a bad side, a dark side, or all sides, isn't there? I just want to tell you, Tom, if you do ever come to Melbourne, Australia, I live in a suburb called Caulfield. Caulfield has one of its major roads is called Balaklava Road.
Oh, wow.
And off many streets, off the little side streets that come off Balaklava Road, are all streets with names to do with the Crimean War. So
right. And we had found those actual recordings of Florence Nightingale and an actual recording of the guy who blew the charge of the Light Brigade. Starting with that, we put the album around that.
I am trumpeter Lamprey, and I... Great idea, Tom.
Thank you.
Yeah. So while these two albums are out, you know, you're building a bit of a catalogue, even though I suppose they didn't use the word catalogue back in the 60s. So did you go out and promote the albums? What did you do? Did you still have to have a day job since those ESP people didn't pay you? How did you survive?
I didn't. I made enough to get by. We got a manager who also was a manager of the Fugs, and he got us moved to Warner Brothers Reprise, and so he would dole out money to keep me and my wife alive after that for a few years.
Any children on the way then yet?
I lived in Holland for about a year with my wife Elizabeth at that time, and Dave was born. We came back to the States, and Dave was born in May of 70. Yes. So from that point on, there was a family of 3.
So I've come across Dave because he does a track on your tribute album.
He had a group called Shy Camp for a while.
So it's in the genes, Tom?
Maybe. My great-grandfather, who lived to be 90-something, he could play any instrument. You hand him an instrument, and within about, say, 10 minutes, he could play a song on it. So if they're genes, they came to me and hopefully to Dave as well. But he's not pursuing a career in music.
What's he doing?
He works with a book reviewing company, and when the new books come out on the back, there'll be a blurb. This was really pretty good, and it's from the Kirkus Review, which is who I think he's working with. And he was an editor for a while, and so he lives in Brooklyn with his wife and our granddaughter, Trixie, who's named after Beatrix, the Queen of Holland.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Yeah, she's going to be 10.
So were you, when you're doing the ESP stuff and then you went to Reprise, as we say here, were you still in Melbourne, Florida, or did you have to travel around?
Yeah, we were in Holland for about a year, and I was writing songs that went on to the Use of Ashes album. We moved around. We ended up in Woodstock, New York, and then from there we broke up. But I moved to Boston, then Philadelphia for a long time, and then down to Florida about 10 years ago.
I've spoken to a couple of fellow artists from Woodstock. I don't know if you ever bumped into John Sebastian and Ed Sanders.
Yeah, well, John Sebastian lived in East Hampton for a while, and that's where we lived too for a while, so that was funny. Ed Sanders lived in the Woodstock area. He was very friendly. He also, his group, the Fugs, recorded in the same studio that we did our first 2 records in.
You record these things too, and then the Use of Ashes, which are another great album. And so are you now on the treadmill? You release a record and you go out to promote it. Is that how it worked back then, Tom, or was it different?
I think our 5th record was done, the one right after Use of Ashes, City of Gold, when we finally decided, okay, well, we'll start touring. But before, that was February of 1971. Before that, we had never appeared anywhere, which I like, because back to why does anyone want a record with 4 white guys on the cover? And I figure people could think what they wanted to about who were these musicians and what were they doing. And there were rumors that we had a drummer who was like a dwarf, and we were all very old and had recorded in Mexico in the 20s, and just all kinds of crazy things. Even, I know once we started touring, we'd meet people who said, we met you 4 years ago, and you played songs for my girlfriend, and all of which are just not true. So somebody was out there being me for a while, which was a little strange, I have to say. I don't know who that was. But yeah, so once we got to touring, it was quite fun, actually. And we finally had a group with second guitar and cello and flute and stuff. And that was my favorite of the performing groups, very much. And then we all split up around in the mid-'70s.
So was that when you started doing albums under your own name?
It wasn't my idea. At some point, the record company said, oh, let's just make it Tom Rapp or something. So, okay, that's fine. Pearls Before Swine was always just me and a bunch of people who were around that I knew, and then we also recorded in Nashville with all the Nashville professionals, who are just excellent musicians, obviously. I think of all the 9 albums from the 60s and 70s as just Pearls Before Swine albums.
A record company today wouldn't say that. They'd say, look, there's Pearls Before Swine, you've created a brand, let's keep that brand name going. It'd be very different today. They'd probably force you to stay with Pearls Before Swine's name.
Would have been fine with me.
And then, Tom, you decided to, call it a day, retire, or from the music industry?
Yeah. In about 1976 or so, I just opened for Patti Smith at Symphony Hall in Boston, and I said, okay, this is it now, and I'm going to stop. And I'd met everybody that I'd want to meet. I met John Lennon, and I met Dylan, and I met Allen Ginsberg, Ed Sanders. It was just great fun and everything, and I said, I want to get on with real life now. And I had no money, of course. And again, that was because the manager that took us to Reprise siphoned off all the money, paid me enough to pay the rent and the phone and the electric and stuff like that. And then he just disappeared one day. I had gone to his office in New York to ask him, please give me copies of all the contracts we have. And I took the bus from Woodstock. I went to his office in New York. He gave me a big, huge envelope all covered with duct tape and said, here's all the stuff. I went back to Woodstock and I opened it. And there was one page of a contract and all the rest of it was folded up newspaper. So when I went to see him again in New York City the next day, he just wasn't there. His office was shuttered up and no one knew where he was. So at that point, I had no money. So I started working I was living in Boston. I started working at the Harvard Square Theater and I sold popcorn. Then I learned a projectionist job and I was a projectionist for a while in Boston in different places and started to go back to school while I was working. And I'd work until 1 in the morning as a projectionist and then I'd go home. I'd get up at 6 and I'd bicycle out to a college I was going to. I did that for 2 or 3 years. And I think in that entire period, I got about 9 hours of sleep total.
Oh, geez.
So I was very tired. But I went to college. I went to Brandeis outside Boston. And then I went to University of Pennsylvania Law School and became a civil rights attorney in 1984.
Is the reason you became a lawyer, Tom, was to right all those horrible wrongs that had been done to you by those horrible newspapers?
I probably should have. But I was interested in civil rights, discrimination, things like that. So it was a nice small firm. My boss was Alan Epstein, and he'd been around doing civil rights work for years. And so we were able to take on cases of employment discrimination. We actually had a case of a young guy who was a brilliant attorney. He was working for a big firm in Philadelphia. They found out he had AIDS, and so they fired him. And they fired him just like the movie.
Yeah, Philadelphia.
So, yeah, but this happened, about our trial in that case was a couple of months after Philadelphia, the movie, came out. So that's a strange thing. And of course, the other side finally, after the case went to the jury and before the jury came back, the big prestigious Philadelphia law firm settled for a whole bunch of money before the jury came back. It was interesting that kind of thing happened. But a lot of cases of age, older people discriminated against and so on. And that's what I did for 20 years, maybe.
You're not practicing anymore?
No, I did about 20 years in Philadelphia, and we decided to move down here to Florida after we'd vacationed here a couple of times. And we got a house here. I got a job with the county attorney's office in Charlotte County, Florida, for about 10 years, and now I'm retired.
Are you near your old house?
Well, actually, it's all very strange. Yes, it's probably 5 miles from my parents' home at the time. They're both dead now. But a block and a half from me, right here, is my younger sister, Kathy, and a block the other way is my younger sister, Patty. So all three of us live within short walking distance of each other and back in Melbourne. So
is Kathy giving the music industry a second try now?
I don't think so. No.
Now, Tom, in the meantime, though, back, I think, late last century or early this century, that's sad but true, isn't it? Back in the 1990s, you came back and released another really good album, A Journey of the Plague Year. So what fired you up to get back into it?
Actually, I hadn't touched the guitar for maybe 5 years, and I hadn't done any performing for over 20 years. And I heard from Ptolemaic Terrascope, they do these series of concerts, usually annually, Terrastock. And Phil McMullen, who was running that, got hold of me somehow and said, hey, why don't you come play here? I really didn't want to. But my son, he was playing in it, and he said, oh, come on, Dad, let's give it a shot. So I guess 97. So I did the first show I had done in, I think, 22 years, some with my son Dave and some alone. And it was just great fun. So after that, I would go out and do a show probably with Terrastock in San Francisco, Providence, a really good show over in England, in London. We did a show at the University of London. After that show, and this was kind of sad, after the show, a guy came up to me and his face was all covered in gauze and so on. He had cancer and he was going to die, and he wanted to see me and he wanted to get my permission to use one of my songs at his funeral. And he died like 2 months later. I was talking to his wife and so on. And people would come up at various times and say, I was going to kill myself, but then I listened to one of the records. Not even necessarily the same records in all these cases. So it touched me very much, and it seemed to really deeply touch some people and be helpful, which I think was the best part of that whole musical career, was being able to help somebody and get these songs out there that sort of accept the fact that life isn't necessarily enormously entertaining. There are dark things in life, and you have to deal with it if you're going to go on and get past them. So that's what I think the best part of having done all that was.
Have you been offered to come out of retirement and do a few little shows?
It's funny, yeah. I just really haven't played a concert for like 5 or 6 years, I guess. I gave my guitar to my son, Dave.
You gave the guitar that you had as a 6-year-old to your son?
Oh, no, the guitar...
I was going to say, Tom, that's quite cheap of you.
It really was. But no, I gave him the Martin D18S that I'd been using for the whole career of performing and so on. But it is funny because, we did some shows here and there in New York, including CBGB's, where Patti Smith started and all that. And then suddenly I'd get these offers, 2 different offers from Japan, and 1 from France, and 1 in Germany and England, and it really wasn't something I could really do anymore. But suddenly there was this outpouring of people wanted to get me on the road.
Well, Tom, these records that you made, there's one thing I've got to tell you is they've stood the test of time, otherwise no one would offer you anything.
It's funny, the first 2 records, the ESP records, have never been out of print since they came out in 67. So that's a long time without going out of print.
Well, that's also a testament to their quality and to their timelessness.
Okay. I'm always happy to hear from anybody who liked the music. There's a really good site where you can get all of our stuff, or look up all of our stuff. It's www.rockmuse.com, and go to Pearls Before Swine on that. It's got all the album covers and all the lyrics to all the songs for all the records, news and discography and stuff like that. It's a man in Holland started it up, and I discovered it when I first got a computer, ran into it. And the last thing, if you could fit it in somewhere, is my wife has cancer.
Oh, dear.
And she's had 3 operations, and she's fine. She's walking around and helping here. But if the people out there, especially in Australia, could send out some good thoughts for Lynn Madison, that would be very nice.
Tom, just want to say thanks very much for taking time to talk with us. It's been a pleasure. Oh, look, I just mentioned the For the Dead in Space tribute. You got a lot of people doing a tribute to your songs, and there's a familiar name there on my list, Thurston Moore of Sonic Youth, so he must have been a Tom Rapp fan.
I guess so.
Never spoke to Thurston or anything like that?
No, he was at a show we were both doing, and hi, that's about it.
So, Tom, thanks very much for taking time to talk with us.
Sure. Good luck with everything, and we send our good wishes to you and all of the purple hazers.
Thanks very much, Tom, and to you too, Lynn. Good luck with it.
Thank you. You too, Dad. Bye-bye.
All the best.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.